Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions, and today I've got with us Graham Plaster, defense technology consultant, founder, and establisher of the Silicon Nation Substack and Meeting Group. Graham, who are you and what do you do?
I graduated from the Naval Academy in 2002, right after 9/11, served 11 years active duty, was on a ship that went to the Arabian Gulf, was on a ship that went down to South America for counter-drug operations, was one of the deans of the Naval War College, and got pulled into the Foreign Air Officer Program, learned Arabic, went to the Pentagon, served as a liaison for the United Nations in Kenya, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and Israel. And then I got off of active duty in 2013 and started a company called the Intelligence Community, Inc., the social network for national security. So I run the LinkedIn group called the Intelligence Community, has 160,000 members. And Moonlit went back to the Pentagon and worked as a senior policy advisor for 6 years. And then in 2019, I became a vice president of Alaska Native Corporation and was the CEO of one of their subsidiary companies. And then I left there after 2 years, started consulting for AI companies, started another company, Silicon Nation. And then I became the director of a nonprofit called Nautilus for 3 years, which is a tech hub for the Naval X for the Navy and the Marine Corps. And we closed the doors on that in May of last year. And right now I'm doing consulting for a couple of small businesses and looking for my next role.
Wow, you've done a lot, and I'm sure that all of that experience that you've gotten has really given you some deep insights and probably some opinions on all of the activities that are happening right now in geopolitical situations that we've dug ourselves into. So just share your thoughts on Operation Epic Fury.
I haven't been tracking it very closely, honestly. Yeah, I've seen a little bit in the news, but I lost my cell phone.
Oh, no.
I haven't been tracking it as much as I should.
Hey, there's something to be said about digitally disconnecting a little bit and getting a little bit of freedom from that constant connectedness. So I think what I've seen is that there has been a dramatic increase in the utilization and the rapid deployment of things like drone systems and in mass, like leveraging a variety of types of technology that we didn't really have in wars past. We haven't really had that tech that would be that next step and that next level for us. I think we've been observers for the most part in Ukraine and providing some commentary on how that's going to change the way that we battle and the things that we bring to the battlefield. But it seems like this is a turning point in which we are going to have to very much more establish ourselves as a forward-leaning and an advanced player in the technology game. So I'm thinking that there's probably going to be some increase in defense tech just as a result of this. So I'm curious to see how that comes out. And I know you're really connected into the defense tech landscape. What types of things are you seeing really take hold and get traction these days?
AI, obviously, drones, counter-drone warfare, and also because of the AI processing, there's going to be a strong demand for data centers, and that could be expensive. We'll see where that goes.
I remember a few years ago, there was some sort of initiative to put a data center underwater, which I was always curious if data centers would start making their way into other environments for utilization of the resources that are there. Do you think that there's going to be like deployment of data centers in space? How are you viewing the establishment of data centers? Is the government going to start like doing their own?
There's been discussion about data centers in orbit because data centers need to stay cooled. And obviously in orbit is very cold up there. Underwater, obviously, it can be cold. So the cost of keeping a data center cold is a little bit expensive.
For the longer term, I'm sure that the costs add up and energy utilization is probably one of the big concerns because that's no cheap endeavor. I'm very aware of that, just even from my own utility bills. It's trying to keep the house cold is definitely not a cheap effort.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm really interested in getting your thoughts and opinions on venture capital and how that's impacting like the defense market, how that looks like. Because in my mind, they are two different worlds that really don't have a lot of similarities or a lot of overlap. But you're aware of, I think, in the hundreds of VCs that are specifically oriented towards defense tech.
Yeah, there's been a kind of a proliferation of defense venture funds in the last couple of years. We have seen a disruption of the major prime landscape with Anduril and Palantir and Chaos and Epirus and some other companies that are defense unicorns raising venture funds coming online. And so I think that there's space for venture funds in the defense tech space. And yeah, some of them are growing pretty large.
Do you think that venture is the secret towards getting into a more competitive place or position for companies? Or do you think that there's still room for those bootstrappers who want to do it themselves?
It depends on the tech. Venture backing is really more for product rather than service. So if you have a consulting firm, or if your company is a woman-owned small business or a hub zone or whatever, then you're probably not going to be able to raise venture funding. But if you're an emerging tech company out of Austin or out of Silicon Valley, then you could probably raise venture funding.
And I think that's interesting. I would love to see if that shifts or changes anytime in the future. I think that there should be room for other avenues for service companies because I think for the most part, at least, products have to have some sort of accompanying service, right? Like you have to have some either way to educate the customer on how to use it and maintain it and go down that route. So I would be interested to see if that's something that venture decides to take a more heavy-handed role in.
Yeah, services have a smaller profit margin than products. So venture funds are interested in high returns, and so they're interested in products.
Do you think that there's primarily be like for the next 5 years or so, AI-enabled products? Do you see AI being basically a part of most of the things that the venture's interested in?
I do. Yeah, there's a craze around AI right now. And I see the future of AI as being like an ecosystem where you have some general AIs and then you have a bunch of narrow AIs that connect to it.
How are you using AI right now?
I can't share that exactly.
Does it enable your life in ways that you never thought possible before?
It does make my life a little bit easier, but I'm not using AI heavily, but I should probably dabble with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think every time I log on to LinkedIn, I see a new list of AIs that do a variety of different things. It's like you need an AI to do your presentations. You need an AI to do your email communication. You need your AIs to do your writing for you. And I'm like, we're probably pushing in a little bit of the wrong direction because I think we need to make sure that the brain, at least the human brain, maintains some sort of high in the loop, right? Because it becomes a little bit unwieldy, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like that Pixar movie Wall-E, where everyone is fat and floating around in chairs with Slurpees and all the robots are in charge.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of fear about that as well. And like the recent decision by DOD or DOW to ultimately declare Anthropic a threat, which I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on that decision. Usually that's something that's a designation reserved for the foreign companies, right?
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of digging into that, but AI companies, obviously, they are a bit of a danger at some point. So we have to put guardrails on them.
Have you heard of the AI for AIs, basically the Claude bot type thing? I think it was Claude bot that was, more like lobster claws. And they basically set up a social network for AIs to proliferate on. And basically they were leveraging each other and each other's knowledge to populate and to engage separately or independently, I think, of people in their own sort of social network. So I'm curious, have you heard of that? Do you see that taking on a life of its own?
No, I have not heard of that. So I'll look into that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion around it. And I think it was based on this one type of AI tool that basically integrates with your native operating system and then uses all of the information it can gather to do things on your behalf. And at one point, it started, I think, its own social network. And it was like, there's got to be a place for all of the bots to communicate. And I was just astounded at the things that were starting to come out of that. I think I saw that there was even some discussion of a bot suing a human for like misuse or something. So I'm always curious to see how these things manifest. And if it's anything like our social networks, it seems like it's probably going to come out in a bunch of trolling and a bunch of fringe sort of philosophies and perspectives. So I'd like to see how far that gets before it just spirals into a doom loop. Yeah, that's always curious to me. You write a lot on a lot of things that are like defense focused, and you host these amazing weekly calls, Silicon Nation calls. How do you come up with topics, or what's your sort of interest areas that you like to leverage for those things?
Normally on a weekly basis, I just Google defense tech or defense innovation in the news, and I look for the most recent articles and I'll rewrite those and I'll put those up on my Silicon Nation Substack.
That's super interesting. I think that there's always room for commentary and discussion around a bunch of those like up and coming and emerging topics, especially within defense tech. How did you come up with the idea for the Silicon Nation calls?
It was at the beginning of COVID. I had been hosting live events for the Intelligence Community Inc. for over 10 years. And we were hosting happy hours. We hosted a polo match. People came and watched. I took 300 plus people to see Dunkirk at the IMAX.
Wow.
And so we did a lot of experiential events for networking. And then when COVID happened, I started hosting a weekly virtual happy hour every Monday night at 6 p.m. And that's still going strong.
I think one of my favorite experiences was one of those first opportunities that I had, and it was during COVID, and you had done a bourbon pairing and sent out these amazing little bottles of bourbon that you had paired with a company, and you ran it just like a fantastic happy hour and gave the opportunity to these companies to show up and put themselves out there and be paired with a bourbon. And I had never received booze via mail before. And I think that was probably like one of the most entertaining and exciting opportunities that I had, especially during COVID, to get together virtually. Have you found that there's a lot of folks outside the DMV that are interested in having these events?
Yeah, there's a few people that call in. There's one guy that calls in from Canada. There's one guy that calls in from Italy. There are people that are outside the DMV that do call in on a regular basis for the calls on Monday evenings.
Have you thought about doing anything like any sort of distributed live events, things like maybe in other hubs like Dayton or Huntsville or areas like that?
I have thought about it in the past. The core audience is in the DMV. And so when I host a live happy hour, I'll usually host it in the DMV, but I have considered doing events in other states.
Yeah, I would love to talk offline about that. I've been giving some thought as to how I can get folks together in some of these little hub areas like Dayton or around Crane or in Huntsville. And there's such a thriving and growing ecosystem there of companies that need opportunities just as much as folks in the DMV do to really get out there. And everybody loves to have, I thought at one point, like a pub crawl would be fun or something like that.
Yeah.
And having even sponsored Ubers where you've got like a little tablet in the back of the Uber talking to you about a company and all the things that they do. So I think that would be a fun thing to see if we can collaborate on.
Definitely be unique in other cities because in the DC area, defense tech is hot. There's multiple events every week. But if you go to other small cities, then it might be a unique thing to host.
Yeah, definitely. Do you see large primes starting to tune in to areas in which they might need to change? Or are you seeing mostly the small up and coming companies, the ones that are leaning in hard to the emerging tech?
Yeah, the large primes are going through a recalibration for sure. Some of them are firing, downsizing a little bit.
Yep.
And the small companies, they're disruptive. They come in, they move fast. But unless they raise venture capital, they can't grow fast. They have to grow slow. And growing slow means that they might die on the vine along the way.
Yeah.
So if you have technology that has a moat around it, that you have a really good tech, then you need to raise a large amount of venture capital. You need to grow really fast.
Yeah, and I always think that's interesting because the dichotomy there is of the Defense Department or like Department of War, government in general, they aren't really known for moving fast, right? So how do these companies sort of project and predict that sort of disconnect there between them being able to go fast and then the government, which typically doesn't necessarily go very fast?
There have been a number of speeches lately with Secretary Hegseth and others that the government and the DoD needs to move faster.
Right.
And so they're having conversations with the commercial sector to see how they can move faster and buy stuff direct from the commercial space instead of bidding it out and waiting 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a big disconnect between the exquisite systems that take years and years to build and budget for and to put into place, and then ultimately the need for some speed of relevance. Not all the, at least industry, has really any insight into or availability or ability to come along and be able to provide that speed that the government's saying that they need. One area that I think is ripe for some, at least, increase in speed and production is things like the shipbuilding industrial base and the maritime industrial base. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, when I was at Nautilus, I spearheaded an effort to raise $20 billion for NAVSEA to build next generation manufacturing plants across the country. They wanted to build 3 plants, each one of them being 20 football fields long and housing like 10 or more companies that are emerging tech companies. And the vision was to be able to 3D print an aircraft carrier shaft.
Wow.
And so we hosted a 3-day event and we brought together 240 companies in the emerging tech space. And then we funded them to write white papers and we brought it to the Hill to raise the money. I don't know where the effort is right now, but it could be funded next year or the year after to do 3D printing of maritime parts. And so we'll see where that goes.
Now, you said something interesting there that kind of stuck out to me. It was that NAVSEA was going to fund this and they were going to foster that. Is that something that you think is going to happen more regularly? Do you see the government taking a more heavy-handed role in establishing some of these facilities and some of the infrastructure that's needed to do some of that building?
Yeah, the guy that was leading it at NAVSEA, he'd been a 30-year engineer and he really wanted these next-gen manufacturing plants. And he was holding off retiring in order to try to accomplish this mission.
Wow.
It depends on leadership within the various agencies. If they're going to carry the torch and try to raise the money,
Sure.
then they can accomplish it. But with Doge and a lot of the people that were innovative leaving government, going into the private sector, some of the people that are in the middle management in government are a little bit more risk averse.
Yeah.
And we'll see where things go.
If you had one piece of advice to give the folks that feel like they are really risk averse within the government space that have some decision-making authority, what would you tell them?
Oh, I don't know if I would tell them anything. I think I would probably try to insert someone who is entrepreneurial and has experience with venture capital and startups. I would try to insert someone like that into government, at least as a consultant or maybe as a full-time employee, and try to get them as a liaison out into the creative world.
And I think if, that role being established, they would be able to facilitate that mutual understanding, both on the government side and with industry. So I think that would be a play in the positive for both directions.
Yeah.
That conversation.
DIA had a defense innovation officer. His name is Dan Doney. It was 10 plus years ago. And he's a really good guy. He left government, started his own company called Securency, and it's worth a lot of money now. But yeah, different agencies, if they have chief innovation officers, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be putting them in the middle of the agency and not on the fringes or siloing them outside of the regular agency's operations would be of a benefit. I could definitely see that. if you have any piece of advice to give to folks that are in the industry side and trying to make their way up in the innovation cycle and with the government procurement cycle, what sort of thoughts do you have for them?
Network with the other innovation people inside and outside of government. There's a lot of organizations now that are focused on defense innovation and government innovation. And I have a list of them on Silicon Nation. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can introduce you to defense innovation groups, and then you can network from there.
Yeah, and obviously join that Monday evening call. That's always a great place to network and to get some firsthand experience from folks that have done it, lived it, and are moving their way up in that entire environment. So definitely suggest Silicon Nation and those happy hours on Mondays. Those are fantastic resources for everyone. So I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. We're hosting one tonight.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be there.
Mhm.
If folks want to get a hold of you, is LinkedIn the best way?
Yes, LinkedIn is the best way.
Okay. Now we'll put all of that information, your contact and Substack and all the links in the episode description. This has been a fantastic conversation, Graham. I really appreciate you stopping by the show. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with for the rest of this episode? Where are you looking to go next and who do you want to work with?
I would like to be the chief growth officer for Defense Unicorn, but I'm happy to do consulting for any tech company trying to get into federal government. And so feel free to reach out to me and we can have a chat.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of GovCon Unscripted. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and make sure you get the new episodes of the show every week and share it with your friends. Appreciate you stopping by, Graham.
Good thing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.